Your phones on mute or vibrate or off, whichever your preference is. That would be much appreciated. Same thing, your iPads, particularly if you have alarms set and you're operating from different time zones, kindly do us the favor of doing that. I'm assuming coffee is served outside or whatever your favorite beverage is. There's time to help yourself to that. It looks like it's going to be standing room only. So I just need to make sure that our organizers have left the reserved seats for our panelists, and it looks like we might need a few additional chairs probably up front over here. So if we can get support for that, again, it'll be much appreciated. Kindly bear with us. We will start shortly. My name is Victor Oladokun. It's really a pleasure, as always, to either MC, moderate events such as this. It's going to be fast-paced, particularly in the interest of time. So we will be asking our panelists to speak fast, and our responsibility will be to listen fast and engage fast. And we'll get you out of here as quickly as possible because we realize there's so many other... Hello? 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 Okay. Hello? Hello? Hi. Okay. This tends to happen at the wrongest of times. For purposes of translation, can you increase the volume a little bit, please? For purposes of translation, you do have translation headsets on the table. Channel 0 is English, and channel 2 is Francais. Channel 1 is French, yes. So avail yourself of that, and we look forward to a great meeting this morning.
person like you.
Good to see you. Excellence. So good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Has
More
there-
energetic this time. Yeah.
Good to see you.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
How are you?
Very well. Good to see you. Salam.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very big welcome to the official launch of the African Development Bank Group's Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook Report 2025. It is a great honor to both MC and moderate this session this morning. My name is Victor Oladokun, and it's great to be in Addis-Abeba, the diplomatic capital of Ethiopia, and a country that is increasingly in the middle of global crossroads. If you haven't visited Ethiopia in just 6 months, I think every single time you come back here, you'll be amazed at the amazing transformations taking place in this beautiful city and in this beautiful country. Today, Africa stands at a defining crossroads in its economic and development journey. But, needless to say, I like to believe that this is a great time to be alive in Africa. There hasn't been a better time than now, in spite of the challenges that we do face. Today, Africa navigates an increasingly interconnected and dynamic global landscape, one that more than ever is marked by economic shocks, geopolitical shifts, climate change, and regional conflicts. As such, this much anticipated report is a critical compass, it's a roadmap, and a strategic document for policymakers, investors, and development partners. As you're about to hear in the minutes that will follow, it identifies critical trends and tailwinds that can propel Africa forward, and headwinds that we must overcome as a continent. We're privileged to have with us today some of Africa's most distinguished economic minds, policymakers, diplomats, and thought leaders. And their responsibility this morning will be to help us unpack the insights from this report and explore practical, forward-looking strategies to accelerate inclusive and sustainable growth on the continent. To set the stage, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, for this power-packed session, let us turn our attention to the screen for a very short video that provides a bird's eye view of Africa's macroeconomic performance and outlook for 2025. Thank you.
In 2024, Africa's growth matched the global average. In 2025, it is expected to surpass it, making Africa one of the fastest growing regions, surpassed only by Asia. Yes, Africa shines as one of the most exciting regions. Energy, tourism, agriculture, and private investments are driving growth in several African countries, with some posting gains of more than 1 percentage point. While the continent's growth held steady at 3.2% in 2024, it's expected to ramp up to 4.1% in 2025, setting the stage for an important year. Each region is forging its own growth path. East Africa leads the way with projected growth of 5.3%, thanks to the dynamism of diversified economic activities in countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Growth projections for West Africa stand at 4.6%, and many of the region's countries are expected to grow by 5% or more in 2025. Central Africa is set to maintain a 3.9% growth rate, driven by advances in the Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. North Africa, bouncing back, also anticipates growth of 3.9%, fueled by recoveries in Egypt and Morocco, despite continuing regional challenges. Southern Africa is on track for the strongest growth since 2021 at 3%, with Eswatini, Zambia, and Zimbabwe recovering from last year's drought. However, progress comes with challenges. Even though the growth rate is slightly higher than the 3% recorded in 2023, it is less than half the level of 7% needed to lift millions out of poverty. While inflation is easing, it remains in double digits at a projected 12.6% for 2025-2026. Public debt is stabilizing, but remains higher than before the pandemic as vulnerabilities remain elevated. Some of the solutions to tackle these issues include creating a more favorable business environment by leveraging regional integration policies and supporting national champions, pursuing and promoting franchising while leveraging the technological know-how, preemptively pursuing debt restructuring, adding value to critical and rare earth minerals. Africa stands poised at a crossroads. With 12 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies, 2025 marks the continent's return to dynamic pre-pandemic growth. This is Africa unleashed, bold, innovative, fearless, leading change, not following it. The future belongs to those who shape it. Africa's time is now.
An excellent video presentation there. Progress comes with challenges, but as we all know, the caveat is that there is no challenge and there's no mountain that's either too high enough that it can't be overcome or a challenge that is insurmountable. And the fact of the matter is, as we just heard in this report, the future is shaped. The future is what we make of it. It is never predetermined. I'm going to ask a favor. And please kindly work with us here. We're in Africa, and as we know, in Africa, when you invite guests to your home, if there's not a seat in your home for the guest to sit down, you don't sit. So I'm going to ask kindly that members of staff, particularly of the African Development Bank, if you could kindly just rise, maybe stand at the back and make room for some of our guests who are still trying to come in, but for which there are no seats. I would really, really appreciate it. It's a small sacrifice to staff members. Kindly just give up your seat just for a few moments. Thank you very, very much for doing that. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Well, following that very insightful video presentation, it is now my honor to invite to the podium Mrs. Nnenna Nwabufo, Vice President, don't stand yet, of Regional Development Integration, don't stand yet, and Business Delivery at the African Development Bank Group. She's just in a hurry to get out of her seat and deliver. But one of the things I want to say is that Inena Nwabufor has had tremendous and diverse experience at the African Development Bank, probably more than 90% of the more than 3,000 staff members who call the bank home. And she brings with that a tremendous track record of excellent performance. Please give her a warm welcome this morning. Oh no, come on guys. I know you've had breakfast, you've had your coffee, we can do a whole lot better than that. The podium is yours. Can we give her a warmer welcome? Thank you.
Thank you very much, big brother Victor. I always thought I was running for election for president of the bank with that introduction. Only that I don't think my name was amongst the list that are being checked by the steering committee. Good morning, friends of Africa and friends of the African Development Bank. Honorable Minister Ahmed Shide, Minister of Finance for Ethiopia, and the Honorable Governor of Ethiopia, the bank's Board of Governors, Honorable Commissioners present, Commissioner Muchanja and Commissioner Mariping. You're all welcome. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address you today on behalf of the African Development Bank Group President and Chairman of the Board of Directors, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, at the presentation of the 2025 edition of Africa's Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook. Africa, like other regions, continues to grapple with multiple shocks such as tightening global financial conditions, geopolitical tensions, elevated public debt, persistent inflation, climate-related disasters, and structural bottlenecks. These challenges complicate policy-making and investment decisions, necessitating continuous reassessment of macroeconomic conditions in our various countries and across the continent. Against this backdrop, the 2025 edition of Africa's Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook provides an evidence-based assessment of recent trends and short to medium-term economic prospects. While acknowledging Africa's resilience, the report advocates bold policy actions to sustain economic recovery and mitigate risks. My remarks today will focus on 5 key areas. One is the GDP growth and outlook. The second one is macroeconomic fundamentals. The third is sovereign debt dynamics, then domestic resource mobilization and policy priorities for enhancing resilience. On Africa's GDP growth and outlook, in 2024, Africa's average real GDP growth was estimated at 3.2%, mirroring 2023 levels, but below the 7% minimum required to significantly reduce poverty on the continent. Growth upticks were recorded in 30 out of 54 countries, largely driven by improvements in hydrocarbons, tourism, agriculture, and private investment. Looking ahead, Africa's GDP growth is projected to rise to 4.1% in 2025 and 4.4% in 2026, supported by economic reforms, easing inflationary pressures, and improved fiscal positions. Notably, Africa is expected to be second fastest growing region after Asia, with 12 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies in 2025 being on the continent. However, despite these positive projections, regional variations persist and risks remain. A reversal in global disinflation trends and fiscal tightening in advanced economies could delay Africa's economic recovery. Now, on the macroeconomic fundamentals, inflation remains a key challenge. It's averaging about 18.6%. It averaged about 18.6% in 2024, far above the the medium-term targets. It's expected to decline to 12.6% between 2025 and 2026 due to continued monetary tightening. Fiscal deficits widened slightly from 4.4% of GDP in 2023 to 4.6% in 2024, but is projected to narrow to 4.1% in 2025 to 2026, but is still above the 3% macroeconomic convergence target. Currency depreciation persisted in 2024 despite the easing of global financial conditions, reflecting that there are lingering monetary tightening in advanced economies, which is affecting our own continent. The current account deficit widened from 1.6% of GDP in 2023 to 2.4% in 2024, and these are due to trade deficits and declining net income. However, external financial flows rebounded by 8.7% to 207.9 billion in 2023, and this is driven by a reduction in net portfolio outflows. On Africa's sovereign debt dynamics, tight global financial conditions are slowly easing, aiding fiscal consolidation and debt reduction. Africa's median debt to GDP ratio declined to 60% in 2024 from 63.5% in 2021-2023, and is expected to drop further to 59.2% in this year. However, there are debt vulnerabilities that remain very high. Rising debt service costs are driven by global interest rates and a strong US dollar continues to strain our economies in Africa. As of September 2024, 9 African countries were in debt distress, with 11 others at high risk of debt distress. Debt accumulation is increasingly driven by exchange rate depreciation and interest expenses, with over 70% of Africa's debts denominated in foreign currency. External liquidity pressures are mounting, as reflected in the rising debt to service exports ratio, which increased from 22% between the years 2015 to 2019 to 29.2% in 2020, while it's estimated at 22% in 2024, is expected to increase to 22.7% this year. On domestic resource mobilization, African countries continue to struggle with revenue generation. Government revenue, excluding grants, fell from 23.1% of GDP in 2010 to 20.2% in 2022, mainly due to declining tax revenue, which dropped from 15.8% to 14.8% of GDP. And this is below the 15% threshold needed for sustainable development financing. This decline stems from inefficient tax collection, limited digitalization, and a large informal sector across the continent. Africa's tax to GDP ratio remains significantly lower than Latin America's, which is at 23.9%, and Europe at 31.7%. Therefore, strengthening tax administrations and addressing institutional inefficiencies are critical for improving domestic resource mobilization in our countries. Policy priorities for enhancing Africa's economic resilience. As Africa navigates an increasingly complex economic landscape, policymakers must adopt a forward-looking approach to reinforce resilience and drive sustainable growth. The macroeconomic performance and outlook proposes key actions for the short as well as medium to long term. Short-term priorities. One is to better calibrate and coordinate monetary and fiscal policies. Central banks should maintain contractionary monetary policy while governments prioritize social safety nets to protect vulnerable populations. The second thing is building foreign reserve buffers. We need to find a way to grow our economy in order to strengthen our reserves, and this will enhance resilience to external shocks and mitigate currency depreciation effects. Preemptive debt restructuring. Countries that are at high risk should proactively restructure debt to prevent distress and default, which will definitely cost the countries more. We also have some medium to long-term priorities. First of all is in investing in integrated infrastructure. Mobilizing domestic and foreign capital for infrastructure projects will boost productivity and economic diversification. The second is enhancing the business environment. Reforms, including modernizing regulations, improving standards, and supporting investment-friendly policies will be essential for attracting private sector participation in our economies. The third one is fostering economic diversification. Supporting national champions and strengthening backward and forward linkages with small enterprises will deepen our domestic markets. And the fourth one is leveraging franchising and foreign expertise. We need to encourage cross-border investments and knowledge transfer to accelerate our industrialization on the continent. Number 5, reforming the international financial system. Addressing Africa's access to affordable capital is vital for sustainable development in Africa. And number 6, strengthening fiscal rules and transparency. We need to establish clear mandates for fiscal councils and debt management offices, which will enhance accountability and reduce fiscal distress for our countries. And lastly, improving domestic revenue mobilization. We have to enhance our tax collection systems, reduce inefficiencies, and adopt digital technologies, and we need to prioritize this in order to increase government revenue sustainably. In conclusion, 2 points. Africa's economic resilience and growth prospects remain strong, but challenges persist. Therefore, addressing inflation, strengthening fiscal policies, and ensuring sustainable debt management will be crucial for maintaining economic stability. Structural reforms and strategic investments will further enhance Africa's capacity to navigate global shocks and sustain long-term growth. Secondly, Africa has the potential to drive global economic expansion in the coming years, but realizing this potential will require decisive and well-coordinated policy actions by our governments. This may seem difficult, but it is not impossible if governments make it a key development agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nena Wabufo, for your compelling opening remarks and for setting the stage for what will no doubt be a very fast-paced tour de force of Africa's macroeconomic outlook. Up next, to shine the proverbial light on the 2025 Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook Report and to lead discussions on its key findings, it's my pleasure, my honor, to invite to the podium, and again, I just say hold your fire for just a few moments, the Vice President and Chief Economist of the African Development Bank, Professor Chika Kevin Urama, who, along with his team, have worked long, hard, and tirelessly to put together what really is a brilliant, incisive, thought-provoking macroeconomic outlook report. So to him and to his team, we're truly indebted this afternoon. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, kindly give Professor Chika Urama a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, my brother, Victor Oladokun. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is really a big pleasure for me to again this year, for the third time in the row, to be presenting Africa's macroeconomic outlook, its performance, and the outlook for the future in this beautiful city of Addis-Abeba. With this packed room and people standing up, it's already testimony to the interests we all have to see Africa continue on this trajectory of improving performance in macroeconomic policy management, public financial management, and growth, achieving the position of second amongst all the world regions. And actually, when you look in depth, as you will see in the report, you will find that even the first is just because of historical path dependency. If you look at the performance of the continent this year that we are looking at, Africa has really outperformed most of its other comparators in the world. So my presentation will run through this amazing demonstration of resilience and capacity to grow, even in the midst of global challenges that we are also going to talk about by African heads of states and government. And I want to start with saying, let's give them a big round of applause. Then we will look at the recent dynamics in Africa's macroeconomic fundamentals, a lot of which my sister, VP Nena, has already touched on. But more importantly, we look at the key tailwinds in the global economy that we need to harness as policymakers, as business owners, and as Africans. And also the headwinds we need to be aware of and manage in terms of the risks, downside risks that face the global economy and Africa's economy as we go forward. And then expound a little bit more on the policy recommendations which VP Nena has already mentioned. On the left here, you will see the growth performance of the continent since 2021. That red line there represents Africa's real GDP growth, estimated this year at 3.2%, slightly above the 3.4% we had in 2023, but definitely looking forward, we see that we